The Seattle Seahawks, I believe, are dark horse Super Bowl contenders. When you think about some of the better teams in the NFC that have a shot at winning this conference, the Seattle Seahawks are really low on the list. And I was looking at the Vegas odds earlier today, and the Seattle Seahawks have the 5th best odds to make it out of this conference behind the Eagles, the 49ers, the Cowboys, and the Detroit Lions. Now, to keep it 100 with you guys, I think that the Seahawks are the 3rd best team going into this season in the NFC. They have one of the most complete rosters in the whole entire NFL. They're loaded at wide receiver. They have a really good offensive line with 2 phenomenal offensive tackles going into their 2nd year. You got right tackle Abraham Lucas and left tackle Charles Cross. Both of those guys had really good rookie seasons. Their interior of their offensive line should improve as well. They drafted a center out of Michigan who I really like a lot in Oluwatimi. He was one of the best centers in all of college football. So I think he's going to have a really big impact on that Seahawks offensive line this year. And you look at their defense, I mean, they're absolutely loaded at every position. They have multiple guys who can get pressure on the quarterback. They're deep at linebacker. They have a phenomenal secondary. You drafted rookie cornerback Devon Witherspoon, who is my #1 ranked cornerback. You're going to be pairing him up with Tyreek Woolen. You also have Kobe Bryant. Both of those guys are going into their 2nd years. You got Quandre Diggs, and you're going to have Jamal Adams back when he gets healthy. This is one of the most talented teams, not just in the NFC, but in the whole entire NFL. And I'm a little bit puzzled that not too many people are talking about the Seahawks more when it comes to the Super Bowl conversation. Geno Smith performed at a MVP caliber level last year. And when you compare the Seahawks roster to the 49ers roster, I think they're on an equal playing field. And last week, when I was discussing why the Seahawks can dethrone the 49ers for the NFC West, there were a lot of salty 49ers fans talking about man, JT, the Seahawks aren't as good as us, man, you tripping. But really, y'all tripping. Go and look at this roster and look at what Seattle has coming into the season. Not only do they have tons of talent when it comes to their starters, but if they have one guy who goes down to injury, it's not going to impact them too much because they have elite depth. And what really has me excited about Seattle this year is going to be the talent that they have on offense. You drafted Jaxon Smith-Njigba out of Ohio State in the 1st round of this past year's draft. He's going to be playing in the slot alongside of DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. The Seahawks have one of the best wide receiving cores in the NFL. This is probably a top 3, top 5 wide receiver room walking into this year. And speaking of walking, you got Kenneth Walker, aka K9, who's looking to have a better season than what he had last year as a rookie. He ran for over 1,000 yards last year, year 1 with Seattle. Yeah, they did draft Zach Charbonnet out of UCLA. He is going to get a little bit of work in this offense, but I still expect Kenneth Walker to be the workhorse back in this offense. He's the more explosive of the 2 backs. He's the home run hitter. He's super dynamic with the ball in his hands. Zach Charbonnet is a better pass catcher. You also do have Kenny McIntosh out of Georgia. I expect him to have a little bit of a role when it comes to passing downs in this offense. Then, as I mentioned earlier, this offensive line is going to be really good. You're going to have Geno Smith, who probably could be considered a sleeper pick to win NFL MVP. Geno Smith may not be the flashiest name, but this guy is good enough to get Seattle to the Super Bowl. And to keep it a bean with you, I trust Geno Smith more in the postseason than I do Dak Prescott and whoever the 49ers are going to have back there at QB, whether that be Trey Lance or Brock Purdy. Geno Smith proved to everybody last year that he's good enough to win you games as long as you give him the necessary pieces around him. And when you look at the talent that they have on the defense with multiple guys who can get pressure on the quarterback, I mean, you got Uchenna Nwosu. You also do have Darrell Taylor, Both of those two guys had 9.5 sacks each. Then you think about a guy such as Boye Mafe, who probably is going to be more of a rotational piece when it comes to this pass rush. There are so many talented players on this Seahawks defense, not just as their starters, but as their backups as well. And as I mentioned, if one guy goes down, they're going to have somebody who's going to be able to fill in and perform at a really high level. Linebacker, you bring back B-Wags, who never should have left in the first place. It was a little bit disrespectful that they allowed Bobby Wagner to sign with their divisional foes, the LA Rams. I'm glad they brought Bobby Wagner back, man. It was really disrespectful how they did Bobby Wagner. I get it. Maybe they thought last year was going to be a rebuilding year, and they probably wanted Bobby Wagner to go and win elsewhere at the later stage of his career. But this is the best shot that Seattle has had at winning a Super Bowl in the last couple of years. And I think that this team isn't being talked about enough when it comes to this championship picture, man. I mean, the Vegas odds have them behind the Eagles, which is understandable, the 49ers, the Cowboys, and the Lions. I mean, you probably could make the argument and say that the Seattle Seahawks probably have the second best chance to win the NFC right behind Philadelphia. The 49ers, their quarterback play was pretty good last year considering the fact that they were playing musical chairs at that position, but we don't really know how good Brock Purdy's going to be going into year two. There are still a lot of doubters of Brock Purdy, and I'm not a doubter of Brock Purdy. I think he's a pretty good QB. I think he's good enough to get the job done, but I don't think that the 49ers team is as talented as what Seattle's is going into this year. And many 49ers fans get upset with that. They keep talking about what happened last year, and I keep telling you guys that you can't judge teams based on history. You have to judge teams based on what they have right now, and what Seattle has right now is a premier Super Bowl contender. This is one of the best young teams walking into this season. I think they have the perfect recipe to be able to at least make it to the NFC Championship and compete with the Philadelphia Eagles. I mean, they're stacked at every single position. There are not too many teams who not just have quality starters, but also quality backups who can be starters on a handful of other teams. Their backup linebacker is expected to be Devin Bush. He played for my Pittsburgh Steelers for the last couple of years, and although he kind of had a drop-off in play after he suffered that big injury after a really fantastic rookie year, this guy is still a serviceable starter at linebacker, and he's most likely going to end up being a backup for Seattle this year. Boye Mafe, he could start on a handful of teams. There are a lot of teams who need quality pass rushers, and Seattle just has plenty of them just sitting on the bench. This Seahawks team, man, you guys better start waking up when it comes to the Seahawks this year, because this is definitely a team that if they make it to the postseason, they can make a deep playoff run, and they can kind of be a little bit of a Cinderella story, even though they shouldn't, because this is one of the most complete rosters in the NFC walking into this year, man. There are not too many teams in this conference that are as stacked top to bottom like Seattle is, and injuries are a big part of the game, so it's great that Seattle has multiple guys who can fill in and perform at a starting caliber level if one of their main core guys goes down for injury. The Seattle Seahawks, man, put some more respect on the Seahawks going into this year. This is definitely a team that could end up contending for a Super Bowl, and this is why I feel the Seahawks are dark horse Super Bowl contenders.